Obviously, I have to practice. I just tried to figure that out because we needed to squeeze a little Queensryche into bad karaoke.
Yeah.
Any Queensryche fans?
If you're from Seattle, you're a Queensryche fan, even if you didn't know it.
That's right.
That's important. And so, just an extra trivia: Geoff Tate used to live in my neighborhood. For real, and I used to go to party. I've been to parties at his house. We hang out, man. Obviously he became.
You gotta be kidding me! Are you serious?
He's awesome. He's hilarious.
Oh, he's incredible, and it's too bad that there was a falling out. Because there were.
I can tell you in excruciating detail all the falling out stuff. I've even seen the lawsuit and contracts and everything. It's crazy.
Really?
Crazy.
Really?
Yeah. But a lot of folks kind of missed out somewhat because Queensryche was really, really peaking at the same time as grunge was taking off.
Yeah.
And grunge kind of took all the oxygen out of the air, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Because, you had a lot of metal bands in the late 80s, and then they're still going, and then grunge gets hot, and I don't know.
Yeah, but Operation Mindcrime, that was like my favorite albums. Olivier's like sitting there going, what the frig?
Olivier believes this.
I believe that. I've never been a big, huge fan of metal and all other heavy stuff, but I can listen to that, definitely.
When I think about
I was about to ask you, Rob, who don't you know?
Well, it's funny. Operation Mindcrime. When I immediately go to Olivier. All my French connections, all my SNCF and other friends in France. One of my guys, I went to his wedding in Figeac, and he was like, "I absolutely believe Operation Mindcrime is the best rock album ever made." So, one of the biggest shows in the world is a thing called Hellfest, which is in a little village called Clisson that's outside of Nantes. And I've walked around that deal. It looks insane. Oh, my God.
Well,
so that's
our homework now.
We got a lot of work. Right. So, Mindcrime. We got Jet City Woman trying to eat popularity.
Silent Lucidity.
Smells like Teen Spirit,
Yeah. Well, they had to go full on cheesy ballads with Silent Lucidity.
Silent Lucidity. It was a hit.
Oh, man, Geoff Tate. Probably one of the best voices ever.
A great voice. When I was hearing the rockin' that you were doing there, it made me think of the hardcore sound that Pete put together for the intro for Windows Phone WTF. I'm sure all the millions of people in our audience are very familiar with that.
That's right. It's burned in everyone's memory. That's
what they think of when they think of Windows.
Available on YouTube. Still available on YouTube.
Still available on YouTube for a limited time.
Yeah. So Olivier, man, this is your second time, right?
This is my second time, definitely. But with all of you guys, I feel like an old timer, anyways, right? Because we're connecting, talking all the time. So I feel at home.
Yeah. Sorry for sound bombing you or whatever, audio bombing you at the IoT Stars event.
Yeah, that was a good one. Who would actually just yell by while recording a show, or not recording, actually during a live show? It's Leonard. It has to be him.
Yeah, that was hilarious. Debbie.
Hi, Debbie.
How's everyone?
We're great. We're much better now that you're here.
Are you on a feature phone?
I am. I'm actually in my car.
By the way,
sounds like a jitterbug, I think.
Yeah. By the way, congratulations. She has 500,000 downloads on her podcast.
What?
Yeah. I mean, she is serious stuff. Congratulations. That's awesome.
That's awesome.
It's funny because when I first started talking about privacy, no one cared about it. So the fact that people are starting to care about it is great.
You're an OG. you're one of the you are the OG. You're like the original. I mean, you're like one of the first people that I saw on LinkedIn talking about privacy and trust and all this stuff. So yeah, you're a thought leader and a pioneer. So congratulations. Well deserved.
That's
Seriously. Yeah.
It's
Lenny
interesting.
was one of the Lenny was one of the first guests on my podcast. You were like episode 3 or something like that.
Wow.
That was a long time ago.
Isn't it interesting when you have a topic that you're passionate about, but you sometimes have to wait for the rest of the world to catch up to you and meet you, you know, and go, oh, wow, turns out this is important, you know?
Yeah.
That's kind of the business we're in, isn't it? I think we're in that business. Right?
We've been in that IoT. We're still waiting for people to discover and think that it's important. So, but you know what? But it's doing better than my OS2 podcast, where I've only had 5 downloads. So you know, there's that.
That's a very niche.
Exactly.
I can try and add some 20% to your viewership.
Oh, thank you.
What were you going to say, Debbie?
Well, 2 things. One is it's not necessarily the volume of people, but it's like who those people are. That's like the most important thing, right? Or who listens to the podcast. But then also, I think when you say IoT, people's eyes glaze over because they don't. Some people don't really know what you're talking about. Like, the stuff is in your house. All the stuff is in your office. You know what I mean? So they don't really think about it in terms of how widespread the use is, and they're not really understanding, you know, that while they're not paying attention, that all this stuff is really impacting them in their lives.
Yeah.
Maybe you just drop some marketing knowledge on us and every other IoT vendor right there that maybe we just should have called it something else.
Well, maybe we should not put a name on it, right? Because we use a name, but actually it's pervasive. It's here, it's everywhere, and it's used in all industries. And actually, it's not even a thing. It's a combination of technologies. And so at the end of the day, does it need a name? I don't know.
Maybe not.
It is what it is.
We call it. Leonard knows that I'm a chair of a group that works on this topic, and we call it connected systems. So IoT is part of that, and so I think people understand what connected means, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the internet, and it has some type of, you know, digital element or data element to it, right? Mm-hmm.
Well, it all ends up at the end of the day, the people on the buy side of this, we're all on the supply side, but the people on the buy side of this know it as whatever the solution is they're buying. So,
right.
And that's the thing is like, oh, it's a doorbell or it's a heart monitor or it's a whatever. And, you know, we're on the supply side. So we think about chips and software and protocols and things like that. So it's kind of a little different universe.
Yeah.
If you try to tell someone on the buy side it's IoT, they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. So
yeah,
they're just looking for a heart monitor. Okay.
Yeah, they see the gadget.
Just speaking of like specific things like a heart monitor or a Ring doorbell or whatever, you know, and Olivier probably has a lot of knowledge on this. Just maybe the people who've been more successful were OEMs who just built a specific consumer or whatever solution and sold that solution. And they, like you said, we didn't call it IoT. It just does this function for you. It happens to send data over the internet or whatever.
Pedestrian safety camera. Okay, cool.
That's what people understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. And as a matter of fact, not just consumers. Like when you talk to businesses or in specific industries, they're not looking for an IoT solution. They don't know what IoT is. Like you talk to people in agriculture, for example, what they're looking for is some way to connecting, you know, their farm, their cattle, getting information from them, not an IoT solution. And so on our side saying, hey, I have this beautiful IoT platform. And people are just like, well, what are you talking about? It's like cloud devices that you're connecting and managing and so on. Yes, but it's an IoT platform. Like, okay.
Right. It's a great thing.
I see.
Absolutely right. I just need that solution that tells me when I need to turn on the irrigation system for my field of my corn or whatever,
Yes.
whatever that is.
I was going to, I don't want to overly plug, but we had a show on a live stream show with the city of Lakewood this past week on our YouTube channel, Edge AI Foundation YouTube channel. And the city of Lakewood, this kind of technology manager guy, Bill Whitaker, was talking about pedestrian safety and how they're trying to solve the pedestrian safety issues in his city. And it was really fascinating because he had all the data about time of day and location and why were people wandering into the road. It turned out because there was a spike in opioid addiction in his city. And so, it all came down to like, here's the tech I used to solve the problem, and issues around, like, I needed a certain level of frame rate to be able to catch people before they went into the road and all this. It was really fascinating to look at it from the other side, from the buy side.
Yeah.
Like, I have this problem and how do I fit? And he had like 4 or 5 different pieces of tech that they used to try to solve the problem. And it was really interesting to see. So if people want to look at it from the buy side, that's always an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
Are they solving the problem for someone walking into the street?
Yeah, so basically it's almost like, the analogy was like almost like you have like wildlife cameras, that like, in case an animal crosses the road or whatever, like there's certain parts of that city where people, because they're pretty intoxicated, are just wandering into this kind of 4-lane street area, and so they're putting cameras on the sidewalks to sort of understand the gait and pace of individuals walking down the sidewalk, to sort of start flashing lights on the street to let people know there's people close by that are probably coming into the road. And so you should be careful. So it's warning drivers that slow down, and that extra second or two makes a huge difference in terms of fatalities.
So you're talking about that frame rate. We can't.
Yeah, you got to have a high frame rate.
Yeah, right.
It's got to be 15 to 30 frames per second. And below that, it just didn't work. And,
right.
And there's low light issues, and there's power issues, and there's all the usual. But it's fast.
So like these great solutions, you take action on the insight. In this case, it's flashing lights. I thought you were going to say high frame rate. We see a person about to walk into a freeway, and we tase them, like shoot this taser thing at them, and it drops them right there, and it prevents.
That's next gen. I think that's next year. Next year, yeah.
Okay. I'm sure.
Yeah. This is just to warn the drivers.
But idea, man, they're just coming at me. I don't know what to do,
Yeah, Rob, that's what we call a digital feedback loop. It's like you should
closed loop solution. Yeah, this is the open loop.
Well, I've been having some interesting conversations about the use of generative AI in that loop, and one of the biggest. I think this is definitely something people are going to discover because they don't know it yet, especially the folks that are thinking about using generative AI and like making industrial control systems autonomous. Like friggin' massive latency issues, like nothing close to what you would need for a critical system. And that I think in about 6 months, you're gonna hear a lot of people talk about that, especially as they come out of POCs. But at reInvent, I was at reInvent like you could go. I guess that was one of the topics that I brought up simply because there are people going around saying, hey, we're trying to figure this stuff out, and trying to get down to that control level. But then when you look at like a RAN, or you're looking at an industrial control system, the latencies you're dealing with in the decision making for these transformer model based applications, it's just not even close, right? Mm-hmm. So it'll be an interesting area of innovation, but it's going to be funny.
It begs the question, Leonard, which is when we talk about smart connected system, IoT systems, intelligent autonomous systems, these are all specialized, dedicated systems, right? They're not like the thing that should be able to do anything and everything. So why do you need Gen AI, which is by nature something that is supposed to adapt? You should have a finite number of scenarios.
Right.
The thing is evolving. And so what you need is good machine learning models
Yes.
And not something that, is too smart or evolves too much. And the other thing, I was commenting on some particle posts on LinkedIn recently. They have this interesting guide for Edge AI describing what it is and what are the challenges it's facing as a technology and so on. And one of the things they didn't mention is the fact that one way of making Edge AI happen is to think about the distribution of intelligence. Every single entity in your system has a specialty, developed for a purpose. You can have some very smart machine learning algorithm optimized for that one feature, one function, and then aggregate these various functions to make a system autonomous. But you don't this notion of having this brain. To me, having this one brain that controls all the sensors, actuator on a machine or on a system, I'm not a big believer in that. So I don't think, latencies and things like that. I don't think that's the right approach.
Dude, you should come on more often, man.
What's that, Demi?
I think it's fantasy to think that that's going to happen. Maybe that gives people investment and big checks, but that's just not the reality. I mean, the fact of the matter is, we can't handle the data we have now, right?
Yeah. Oh my God.
So, now you're creating more complexity in a system where you're trying to have it think on its feet, and it's a headless system. And I think before people went gaga over generative AI, the thing that you were talking about, that's how AI was. It was purpose-built, right? It was doing narrow things, and it was doing it well. It could do it forever, as long as you wanted it to do, right? But then now you're trying to make these everything machines, and it's creating all these additional risks, and, especially in systems where you need stuff to work 100%. It can't be like, well, it works sometime and not other times, or, the result we want, or the question we ask, get a different answer every time. That's horrible. That's
not reliable.
Yeah.
Any type of enterprise application.
Yeah, and keep in mind, in order to make quote unquote these models better, which really means making them more specific, with GPT-4, they moved toward a mixture of expert model right, or framework. And what's that? You're basically decoupling the model into expert models and then creating sort of this network of experts. And you're doing exactly what you just described earlier, Olivier, is making these things more valuable and reliable by making them more narrow and specific, and just applying this orchestration layer on top. And that's a workaround, man. So this is why all this stuff starts to make little sense. And your comment about the application specificity is really important. And, I was at Marvell Industry Analyst Day, and that was a big topic, because when you start talking about these custom supercomputing systems, they're geared toward a specific model, a specific application. Is not general purpose. It's scaled out, but it has a certain domain that it's geared toward and optimized for. But still, you have, when you start to try to bring this down into these real-time environments, and I don't mean real-time like batch and all this other crap. We're talking about low latency, millisecond type environments where, you need deterministic everything. This stuff is so far away from that. And that's why anytime I hear these people going, oh, we're going to bring generative AI, is going to do all this crazy shit down in the lowest levels of the network.
Those are people on the supply side that are trying to find a market for it. The buy side. You'll never find anyone on the buy side that's interested in that. It's only the people on the supply side that are like, I think we can make it do this.
Yeah.
The pamphlet on the airplane today, and it said, we're going to the moon, people.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be great. I always I don't want to get too technical for everybody, because, you're talking about this big brain, controlling everything, and I do think it's crazy. And so from a real technical perspective, the big brain, I usually think of either two things. like the brain bug in Starship Troopers at the end.
Okay.
And we have talked, Leonard remembers, we talked about the brain bug before. Remember, brain out and all that kind of stuff. But the other thing that's probably more relevant to more people on the planet Earth is, check out the big brain on Brad. I think of Samuel L. Jackson in Pulp Fiction, Did you didn't get that? You didn't get it?
Yeah.
Good cultural.
Debbie got it.
Okay.
Always do that crap, man.
Yeah.
I want to ask about Bill's hat. What's going on there, Bill?
I want to know what that said.
Oh my god, what is that?
It says Coca-Cola.
In Chinese?
Japanese?
Coca-Cola.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
How many hats do you have?
Somewhere on the order of about 150, maybe 200.
A lot of hats.
You got to have something that matches what you're wearing, man.
I know.
Yeah. Everything cool on your hoodie today?
Nah, just straight black.
Straight black.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
But hey, Bill, since you've been so quiet, which is completely unnatural of you. Yeah, I don't know.
No, I mean, I was really just listening to what everyone was saying. I mean,
He does what a good consultant does. He just sits back and listens.
you just sit back and listen, I mean, well, first and foremost, if you're going to build a solution, you have to sit back and listen. You have to know what the problem is, and you have to synthesize that data into something that is going to help solve that. And what Pete was just talking about is something that we've been working at for the past almost 13 years, and that's the whole Vision Zero stuff.
Yeah,
right?
Vision Zero.
What they're thought, and there is no one answer, because every single city has a different amount of data. They have a different, some cities don't even have a traffic management system. They've outsourced that. So, I mean, there's so many different things that you have to work with in terms of trying to help solve that. And then there's multiple layers underneath all of that, right? If we ever think that we're going to get to a point of autonomy where you're going to have these autonomous corridors, we are years away from that. Because the thing that we're not talking about is the trust in the data.
Yeah.
And the security around all of that. I mean, I was having this conversation, earlier today about PGP, which is pretty good privacy.
Remember PGP on your email?
Yeah. Right. And that is still out there in the wild. And as a matter of fact, people, are considering it unhackable. Oh. And I'm like, well, eFail kind of did just that to some degree by injecting, text into the email, which is supposed to be encrypted. But I mean, I think my point is that, honing in on a specific problem and trying to solve that's critical. It's critical. Right. And then establishing the trust. So all of this stuff is going to take quite a bit of time. And those Pete, to your point, on the supply side, they need to understand that it's not a rapid path to revenue.
Right. It's not one size fits all.
A journey.
And that's where you start to run into a lot of these technologies run into a digestion issue, right? Like if you look at telco right now, there's indigestion, right? If you start throwing more technology stuff at them, they're just barfing the stuff out. They just can't take anymore. And then when you look at the clock speed of what's happening in the generative AI side of the house, especially on the supercomputing stuff, it doesn't necessarily, as you start to take it downstream, is it down or up toward the end markets, there's no appetite. I mean, when they start to discover how much data cleansing and actually it's knowledge, because there's more and more talk about knowledge. We talked about this in IoT Coffee Talk before, having these graphs and really graphs probably more important than vectors, vector databases that are indexing quality data. That is really freaking hard, and there's stacks and stacks of deficiencies in the technology where this stuff is just going to cost so much to make it useful. And this is what these people are discovering in POCs. And so the only things that really are valuable are,
Man, you sound like such a consultant from IBM or something.
who, me?
You've just been saying all kinds of shit that we got barfing. We don't have an appetite for the barf. We've got vector databases.
Sounds more like a doctor than a consultant. I mean, out here.
A lot of gastrointestinal issues.
Oh, okay.
Anything. Why don't we get a quantum computer in there while we're at it, man? I love
Yeah.
this.
Okay. Do that. Well, that's next. That's next. You can barf that.
Well, it's a contribution to digital exhaust.
There you go.
Anyway. All right.
Well, I think that the
I gotta
telephony folks, I got to drop too, but the telephony folks, they have a bigger problem, which is all their networks are now hackable because of all the legacy equipment in there, which I think people have read about in the news. So
Yes, they're telling it's SMS.
All right. See you guys.
Adios.
right.
Okay. Don't barf. Okay.
It's hard not to, but don't try. Whatever. Wow. Oh, good.
Gosh.
It's just the smart people are left. Oh, good.
Wow.
All right.
Oh, Rob, that's, you're recorded, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
huge. You know what Pete just saying made me think about, the fact that we do forget. We're talking about the fact that we need to focus on the outcomes, on the customer's needs and so on, especially as a vendor or as a service provider. But we ourselves often forget that there is legacy equipment and technologies that when we will be based on leveraging, working on, interpreting with, and that's something that is super important. Like when you work in industrial automation, you understand that because equipment in factories are here for the next 10, 20 years and have been there for the last 10 years. And so you need to interact with them and find the right way of extracting the data and so on. So that's, yeah. And by the way, just like in the same, train of thought, when we talk about Gen AI and AI in general, we all forget about this thing that no one talks about anymore that is necessary, which is called big data. That term big data, I don't hear it anymore.
I remember big data. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the problems that we still have to sort out or deal with when it comes to, training models.
But what the hell is big data?
It's different.
I've never been able to figure that one out. I've seen very fast data. I've seen a lot of little data. I don't know what the hell big data is.
The official definition of big data is any data set that's bigger than you can hold in an access database on your PC.
Yeah.
Okay.
Big data is basically trash.
Yeah.
Is it terabytes of data? Is it petabytes of data to be big data?
So can somebody take the trash out? Because this whole conversation, I keep hearing, I hear this, I talk to other, folks that are in the space and they're talking about the data lakes. I'm like, holy shit, is that back?
I remember data lakes.
Oh, it is back. No, it's not just back. It's like the Microsoft and others, they are just, they're making money on that. And that's, I actually brought it back in a conversation for the following reason is that when we want to work on actual concrete solutions with customers, we bring these terms and we just say, hey, it's going to be like kind of easy, big data thing. You just like shovel your data, whatever the format in that big, huge one lake thingy in the cloud. Because one lake is a new term. You have data lake, now it's one lake. It's like you have only one big lake, which is called the ocean. I don't know.
But in the last few years, we've had the data lake house.
Data.
Oh,
Okay. You've heard about the lake house, right?
That was definitely a Microsoft term.
It is. It is.
You've heard the
Lake
data
house.
lake.
It is.
Lake house is an architecture built by Microsoft.
Yeah, it is. It is. But then back to my point, when we start working with customers on actual implementations, leveraging some of these services that are supposed to address these like keywords, buzzword, whatever, problem spaces, then suddenly you talk pricing and people are just starting to freak out. It's like, oh, wait a second. I thought that big one lake thing or data lake, whatever, is like kind of the easy way of dealing with all my data for free. And you're just like, no. And so
no one said the free lake.
Again, how do I do that locally? How do I bring all that locally? I can rack some servers with some storage and start doing my own analytics here, can't I? And we're starting to see that. At least I'm starting to see that. Privacy is one of the reasons. Pricing is the other one, where they are starting to say models, data, big data, but I can now do that. Now you get a 2 terabyte drive for like $60. So, why not doing everything locally and starting doing your things at the edge? If I, just throwing another keyword here.
Well, now you say that, but isn't that like contradictory? Because the edge was supposed to reduce the amount of data that goes to the center cloud.
That's right.
Agreed. And actually that's going in my direction, which is we are coming back from that. The pendulum is coming back from saying that everything needs to happen to the cloud to back to something which is more reasonable, which is, hey, I need to keep some of that data, if not most of it, down there. I need to do my analytics down there. I need to filter out all the crap out of the data that is useless for, anything else and do things down there at the edge. So but I think it's that pendulum is coming back. We used to talk about smart things and everything was happening down there and then everything happened in the cloud. And now we're back to that, not middle ground, but some position in between that is about re-enriching that edge and bringing some of these technologies down there.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of tech people were saying all these things. I don't know if the customers ever said any of this shit.
No, none of the customers said that. I mean, the customers heard the buzz and then they jumped in on it saying, oh yeah, we're doing that. And you ask them, what are you doing at the edge? I don't know. You have to talk to Microsoft or you have to talk to Google or you have to talk to whoever else it is that said that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a data lake house on my edge computer that's a little rugged PC thing. And I don't know how I did it. I had to use compression to get it all to fit on there. I used Stacker or whatever the compression in DOS 6.2 had. I don't know.
Or don't get into asking them what they're doing about privacy or anything like that. Though, it's a secret.
It's a secret.
It's private.
Yeah, I can't share that with you.
Exactly.
I've got a private key.
The whole data lake thing, though, you're right. A lot of tech people talked about that. A lot of startups got created around that. It all came out of Google and all that stuff, and Yahoo and all those startups happened, and they said, we're going to build data lakes, and customers were like, all right, sign me up. I'm going to put my big data in the data lake. And so what do? Just select star from data lake where customer first name equal Debbie. And they're like, oh, no. You don't get to do stuff that you're familiar with. You've got to use Yarn and Pig and a bunch of other BS tools that you've never heard of. And guess what happened in the enterprise? A whole lot of people are like, no, I don't want to do that. It's too hard. That's where tech people miss the mark. Familiarity, skill sets with customers means so much. And when you try to pull them into a place that is super unfamiliar, even if it makes sense, you lose them. Case in point, Windows 8. Do you know
Another example of what you're just saying. So Microsoft Fabric is that Microsoft big solution for big data analytics, all of that, whatever soup. They just now, like at Ignite, like 3-4 weeks ago, they announced the support for SQL database in Microsoft Fabric. You would think that should have been the number one type of database supported, right? No, it's 2 years in. Like Fabric has been around as preview for 2 years now. That they are just announcing, and they're happy. Actually, they went at Ignite was like, kind of the, I stopped beating my kids, reaction of like, we have SQL database, yoo-hoo! And everyone's like,
something that customers understand. Wow, amazing.
Yeah, but like 2 years in.
On this planet Earth, we have about 8 billion people that know SQL. And they don't know all that other bizarro stuff. They just don't know it. But everybody knows SQL. And so, there you go.
There you go.
I still don't get it, man. I mean, look, I'm figuring like this. Somebody tells me they got a data lake. I'm like, give me the fishing pole.
I love it. I love it.
Just give me the fishing pole. I mean, I'll see what I get. You know, somebody.
We create a new startup around that uses those kind of terms. Instead of using yarn to query the data lake, we use like the fishing line instead of yarn and string. Get it? Yeah, that's bad.
I mean, it's really for me. Sometimes I just sit there and I just shake my head, man. I'm just like, really? I mean, do we have to make it so complex?
I know. If you told people I can make all this stuff work in a super giant SQL server or Oracle database with regular SQL, they would be so happy because they understand it. They understand it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Because they don't understand all this other, what's Fabric? Microsoft Fabric. It sounds really sexy. It sounds high tech. I have no idea what it is. It might fail because of that.
Yeah.
Well, I thought my suspicion, I could be off base here, but my suspicion is Fabric was created to combat Databricks.
Ooh.
Actually, Bill, I think not only you're on something, but if you talk to Databricks people when they announced Fabric, I can tell you firsthand they were not happy. They were not happy.
I know what's here.
To this conversation around complexity and why do we make it so complex, I think I would ask the question, things are complicated. Like we are in a domain that is complex by nature, but should it be complicated for the users, for the customers? I mean, like at the end of the day, you get into your EV, you don't need to understand how everything works. You need to understand there's like two pedals and a wheel, and that's, you're going to press that button to turn it on and drive. And at the end of the day, dealing with your data should be exposed in a way that is, as simple as, getting your fishing pole and, getting the data. But you need to be guaranteed you're going to get the right fish, the one you want for your dinner in a reasonable amount of time. And so that's something, and you would pay for that service. You would actually be totally fine if you had this guarantee that you're going to be able to go fish that piece of data of yours that you need when you need it at a reasonable cost. How it's done underneath, customers care, right?
Yeah.
They care when they care starting to understand what's going on when pricing is shown or described, and also when they're looking at the privacy and so on, liability, basically. I'm liable because my customer's data will be in that thing, and I will be the one sued if there's a problem. So I need to understand what's going on down there. But if they didn't have to, they wouldn't want to understand. And so we as technologists should try and talk simpler and I know, Rob, you've been doing that a lot for the last few years. Simplicity in the way we present things, in the way customers will interact with them is key. It's like they want to use that thing. They don't want to understand what's in there.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I looked at Databricks before and I was like, God bless America. This thing is expensive to operate. And I think enough people said that, and Microsoft was like, hey, they're one of ours. We're going to learn and we're going to try to do a cost reduction. And rather than, the bricks are hard and they build things, we're going to be Fabric. We're going to cover you.
We're going to use the bricks. We're going to use the bricks.
Yes.
Yeah. This sounds so much like what Amazon does to people who sell their own stuff on Amazon. Like, I'm selling these blue plastic balls. And then as soon as they get really popular, Amazon comes up with their blue plastic balls that are undercutting you.
Is it theirs, or is it just branding to put on top?
Yeah. I don't know.
Yes.
If you look at Databricks, like implementations in Fabric, if we weren't able to look at the code, knowing that lots of data, like Databricks is open source, it's just like, you know what? At the end of the day, looks similar.
Looks very similar.
Looks very similar. I hate that. A lot of open source people got screwed by the cloud in the last 10 years. And you saw people like, I can't believe this. we put all this work in and they built an entire cloud based on the work we did and they're making all the money. And the cloud people say, well, but you said it was okay for us to use your code free of charge. So I don't know what the problem is. I know you're pissed off, but we built an entire giant business called AWS on the backs of open source technology, and we're number one. And so you started seeing cloud open source players start creating new licenses on some of their stuff where it said, if it's going to be a hosted cloud thing, then you've got to do it this way, or you saw some of them creating their own little clouds to host their stuff, because I'm sure they're all just going, what do I do? How do I, because they're all getting cannibalized by cloud players, Yeah.
Well, I mean, but they, it's a little bit of genius, right? Because if you want to be in any one of the CSPs marketplace, they all have this review process where they want to look at your architecture.
Yeah.
Now, any of us know if I start looking at your architecture, I'm going to be like, hey, wait a minute, how are you doing this right here? And you're doing this. And now all of a sudden, all the little secrets come out.
Yeah. But Bill, isn't that true? Isn't that true and valid in cases where the customer doesn't really get the value or get like when they need to get into that level of details of the implementation? It's because there are concerns about the fact that, hey, what am I paying for? Because if the value of that thing were to be that high and that good in terms of saving money, in terms of generating more revenue, and business, they wouldn't even ask. They would just be like, hey, you sure? So we'll say, no problem, right? And the vendor will say, yeah, no problem. You can go ahead. And they would just do that and go with it. Now, if they start seeing that the value add is like kind of like super low down there, they would start looking at it saying, hey, maybe I can do it myself, or I need to understand what I'm paying for here. Because, it's something that, as I was saying, looking into the details of how things are implemented, is it really necessary for a customer if they see an immediate value, and they will just go for it? They won't even think about it. They won't even read the little lines on the contract. They would just sign down there and just use it.
Yeah, they would. But you know what? I think that we're in this state right now where, cybersecurity threats are through the roof. Privacy concerns are, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
So if you're bringing me this solution and you say, here's what it is, here's what it does, they're going to say, okay, because so much of what we have, right, is predicated on people, process, and things.
Great. Now, same situation, but if I sell you a service and tell you, with the service, I take on liability. I will indemnify you if anything goes wrong. Would you want to know how things are implemented, despite like all the privacy and if the risk is down because you're not doing it yourself and the vendor is telling you, no, it's on me, so don't worry about it. That's when we'll just go for it, right? And I mean,
most I would say most enterprise buyers would. It's when you're dealing with local city and state government that changes the game. Even if you say, I'm going to take liability, they're going to go, that's a requirement.
Sure.
It's not, you're not doing me any favors. You are mandated to do this if we buy from you. And as a service, now they're saying, and on top of that, we want this and we want, so these things make it a challenge to do business with local city and state government.
You know what? You're going on to a field that I'm, if not passionate, at least interested in, which is the level of regulation. When you get closer to government agencies, states, and so on, there is more regulations that you have to work with. And when you are in the pure enterprise business, regulations are further away. You need to deal with them, but they're further away, especially in the US. Coming myself from Europe, as an enterprise, you have to deal with regulations. So that's normal, right? And so switching from a normal customer to a government customer is not a big deal. Here in the US, it's really different. I hear you. And yeah, Regulations definitely, to me, are one of the reasons why you need to pay attention. And that's why you have these certifications as well, right? Once you have a solution that is certified for whatever regulations, then
Well, yeah. And, I'm so glad that the guy from Europe is the one who brought up the whole regulation thing and not me, so I don't look like a bad guy like usual. Thanks
I'm here for you, man. I'm here for you.
Appreciate
No,
that.
I mean, you have to look at those. You have to look at those things. I mean, this is when whenever we're building it, it's we're looking at, cybersecurity first and foremost as the foundation. And then as we rise up the stack, we're starting to place requirements on the other pieces. So if we're using anything, we'll say, we don't care what your transport is as long as it complies with these things. So if you give me a transport and it's not TLS, I got a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And in some instances, if it's not DTLS, I got a problem. Right?
That's a UDP person.
No, he's living in the real life. He's living in the real life, of actual customers and actually delivering things that work and they're used and that add value at the end of the day.
Yes. And I mean, and from a privacy perspective, it's one of those things. It's like you latch on to a certain way of doing things. And I mean, and you just go and you say, this is the best. You have to stay and maintain being a student of technology and understand what's happening across the landscape. And if there is something that's actually better, you got to look at your own stuff and go, okay, well, look, let's pop that one out, or let's pop this one in, or let's add support for this so that, you're going to have a varying degree of technical customers that are going to say, hey, wait a minute, we know that there's exploits here. We know that there's a problem here. And what are you doing about it?
So true. So true. And you need to understand the constraints you're working in. Regulations is one of these constraints, and you have to work in the boundary of these constraints because that's where you're safe, where you can guarantee anything to a customer, and for a customer to make sure that they are in a good place when using your services and solutions. Yep, agreed.
No, funny thing that you say that, because I started asking questions. One of our partners, we're like, okay, we're going to integrate, and they're like, well, we need a tight integration. I'm like, no. We're not doing a tight integration. We're going to do a very abstracted integration. So we're going to create interoperability because I don't know what you're doing on the privacy side. And they said, oh, well, we anonymize. I'm like, bullshit.
Totally.
You're not anonymizing. You're anonymizing. I'm like, the data is still there.
Right.
We blur out this. I'm like, that doesn't mean anything. That can be ripped off and everybody can see it. No.
It's true.
Right. And when I talk with companies that are building tools, when I'm working with their development teams, I'm saying, don't build it so tightly where people can't take stuff out of it. The data, right?
Right.
If you do, it's going to be hard. It's going to make it hard for you to sell your product in different markets.
That's right.
True. Yeah, I like the term zero trust. Approach things with a zero trust mentality. Don't trust anything. Don't trust anyone. Just like
that's it.
Like, but I think it's a good thing to have this kind of approach.
Well, I tie the zero trust to continuous authentication. And I do that from a solution perspective as well as from a partner perspective. So if I have a partner, I don't trust you. And you tell me you're going to do something, I'm going to continuously authenticate you.
Good.
Right.
Good. That's the way to go.
That's good. Think about how zero trust might work in a traditional IoT platform. Before zero trust, from what's his name from Denmark who invented it, it was like, well, we've got a moat around our data center, our cloud, and once you're in there, everything's good. It's like your device is sending telemetry over the internet or whatever. Yeah. And that first moment you capture and you authenticate that packet of data, it says, oh, yeah, your device is 25, and here's your security token or whatever. You're good. I'm going to drop you into some kind of message queue or something like that. Mm-hmm. But then people weren't necessarily re-authenticating that packet on the next stage of the journey. Like, I'm going to hydrate a digital twin, or I'm going to send it to this database, or I'm going to whatever.
Mhm.
And so to do that true zero trust, always authenticating over and over again, it's like every step along the way, you've got to re-authenticate that packet of data somehow.
Yep. 100%. I mean, we ask our own customers the question when they're talking about, oh, well, we can do X, Y, and Z, and we can, bring on, a next set of sensors. I'm like, hold up, time out. What's the cost of bringing on that new sensor? And how does that work? And then we get into so easily it's a way to dissect exactly what it is that they're saying and exactly what it is that's needed in order there's no such thing as future proof. There is continuous improvement within the solution. So we look at it as if we're sitting and we're the edge component, we're looking at those sensors and we're saying, all right, well, there's got to be a traffic cop. So before anything comes onto that network, it's got to be, who are you? What's your role? And what services do you need access to?
Yep.
And then we're going to validate that, and you'll get a certificate that actually allows you to do those things. Oh, and then, by the way, we're going to continuously authenticate you to make sure that you're not changing.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Brings up some memories of the time I was, at Microsoft in the Windows Embedded group, and good buddy of mine, Mike Hall, was working with Microsoft Research on trying to define what a device identity was. As in, identity platforms, they know really well users. They don't know devices. They know a user is logged in onto a machine and very often delegates their permission to the applications or whatever services are running on that machine. And that's the way lots of IT platforms are dealing with identifying a packet of data coming from a machine. It comes from not a machine, it comes from a user very often. And it was like, Rob, Mike, right? Mike Hall. And he was thinking about that. Yeah, he was thinking about that 15 years ago. Yeah. And he was already trying to define what the device identity was. At the time, we're just talking about connected devices. And it was like, wait a second. So we're going to bring these things online. So they need to have an identity. And he actually, there was an uphill battle for him because no one wanted to hear about, we need to change the way we're dealing with identities. It's not a user anymore. There's no birth date or any other way to identify that person. No, it's not a person. It's a device.
And we had to do that in embedded devices with smartphones. There might be a user using the smartphone, but there was also the notion of identifier for the smartphone itself or embedded stuff. Like if I go
smartphones have decided to go with the SIM card identity, right? Which is not the right way of going because that SIM card can be put in another machine, right?
A lot of people I know today have told me, people who are a member of this team who are never on the show ever, who love to bash people on LinkedIn, will tell you that you just should use a SIM card for everything, even if you're not using cellular. And I'm like, what? So go talk to the biggest, lurker on LinkedIn, Rick Bellata. He'll tell you. He wants you to use the SIM card. Hey, you know what? There was a time when we were working on building Longhorn at Microsoft that our team was asked about we worked with the Windows people with the idea of doing a SIM card and using that as a unique identifier for everybody on a Longhorn machine. And then that didn't get launched. And then we did Vista or whatever. But people are always thinking, to your point, they're always thinking, what is that unique way to do an ID? Is it some GUID? Is it a serial number? Is it something that's in the hardware? Is it something,
I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, look, SIM cards can be spoofed.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. SIM cards can be spoofed. I mean, this is why I think the integrity of any given device is what you're looking at. The device ID is typically, from the way I'm kind of looking at it, it's multiple things. It's not a single unique identifier. So we're looking at MAC address. We're looking, if it's a cell, we're looking at IMEI. If it's, we're looking at a series of things. We're looking at what the firmware version is running on that device. If it's an RTOS, what is it? We're looking at that. That's how you get on the network.
Yeah.
Now,
It's kind of the I was trying to find what's the equivalent in the device world of biometrics for humans. It's a series of things, right?
It's a series of things.
Authenticate a human based on several biometrics, like to actually cross-reference and make sure that if fingerprint has been spoofed or replaced, that now you look at the retina, whatever, and you have another part of that biometrics that is unique to that human being. So what's the equivalent for machines? I like your approach, Bill, of saying it's several things. It's not one piece of information. It's not that seed in that HSM that comes encrypted, because even that could be spoofed. But maybe a combination definitely gives you a better percentage of accuracy on identifying a device. Agreed.
Because what happens if you don't use several things for a fingerprint and you just use one thing? I'll tell you what happens. Wesley Snipes takes your eyeball on the end of a pen and holds it up to a retina scanner in Demolition Man. That's what happens.
True. Pop culture all the way to the end. Like that.
Yeah. We do need to have a conversation around authentication and what that means. Because it can't mean one thing, and it can't always mean, retina scan or going farther towards all these kind of dystopian ideas. I think people do enough things that can make them unique. So part of authentication, I think, maybe, behavior, history, certain things. But I think, especially when I'm thinking about a lot of companies trying to have to deal with like age verification and stuff like that. I think, everyone's not going to throw their ID up on any random website. That's just not going to happen. So like in an enterprise, we need to just rethink what authentication means. And as Bill said, it will be, I think, to be successful, it will have to be several things, not just one thing.
Yeah, I agree. And does that kind of blow apart the whole notion of, we'll just use X509 certificates on my device?
Oh my God.
But that
radius server stuff, man.
I think that's the gold standard for security, And I don't think it works.
Well, I mean, I'm going to say this, and this is how I'll go out. Don't believe me. Listen to Debbie.
Listen to Debbie. That's the default answer for everything, I think.
Listen. Yeah, exactly.
I love it. Well, I guess we can wrap it up here. Bill, do you want to take us out, please?
You know what? Absolutely. Hey, everyone. Look, we're actually coming to the end of the year. And this is one of the last episodes you're going to get in 2024. And we're going to be heading into 2025 with a bang. But in the meantime, focus on solutions, listen to your customer base, and put cybersecurity and privacy top of mind every single time, and you will find success. Won't always be fast and won't always be easy, but listen to IoT Coffee Talk. Hit that like button. Go and follow Debbie Reynolds, the Data Diva. She drops jewels and gems all day long. And come back and see us again next week.
Outstanding.
Absolutely.
All right.
You've done that before.
All right. Adios, everybody.